Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Amy Whisenand Krall. She is an assistant professor of biblical and theological studies at Fresno Pacific University out there in California. Just made the move, having finished her Ph.D. from Duke Divinity School. She's a graduate of Whitworth College before that. Amy, it's great to see you.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking this time to be with us. Now, you have written on Colossians 3:16. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, how did you get started reading biblical languages?
Well, I actually started learning Greek in middle school.
Middle school, wow.
Yeah, my dad taught me. There were a couple guys in our church that were going to be ordained, and they needed to take exams in Greek. And so they were nervous about it. And my dad, who knew Greek, was like, "Oh, I'll go ahead and teach you." And then he realized I was old enough to start learning. And so he said, "Well, you're going to learn too."
Fantastic. Did it stick at that age?
It did. I became very entranced with the language. I fell deeply in love with just the words and the syntax and the way the language was put together. And I kept studying throughout high school. I actually took classes in high school at Whitworth, where I eventually went to college. And then I kept taking Greek, and that led me to seminary eventually, and then to do a doctorate, all kind of pursuing this love of Greek.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, did you have to study Hebrew along the way, or Aramaic, any of those other languages?
I did. Once I got into seminary, I took Hebrew and Aramaic and Syriac, and
okay, so Syriac as well.
I did, yeah, just a little bit. But yeah, I love languages, and I taught English in Germany for a while.
Oh, you did? Okay. So you had to learn German.
A little bit of German in there too, yeah.
Well, we're going to talk today about Colossians 3:16 because that is at the heart of your thesis that you were writing on while you were at Duke Divinity School. And it's a fascinating passage. So let me just step back and let you set it up for us. What are we looking at here in Colossians 3:16?
Let me just read it. It's such a puzzle of a verse. Like, you could spend time and extensive time with every bit of this verse, but I want to focus particularly on one prepositional phrase. But to set the context, let me just go ahead and read it here. "Let the word of Christ dwell with you richly, with all wisdom, teaching and instructing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, with gratitude, singing in your hearts to God." So just focusing on that phrase, with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, I think an interesting question to ask is, like, what does it modify? Because translations put it with different participles. You have the NRSV that puts it with singing. So it's singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts. And then a lot of commentators will kind of go that direction. But translations like the NIV and the KJV and the NASB all put it with teaching and instructing. So then it's teaching and instructing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.
So this is how you teach, in other words, in a way?
Yeah.
You teach each other and you admonish, or I guess encourage, would that be another word? Or correct, something like that?
Yeah, I like the word admonish. There's kind of a more robust sense than just like telling somebody what the case is, but there's a corrective element to it.
Sure.
And a formational aspect.
So where did you come down on this? What do you think? What does it modify?
I think that it modifies teaching and instructing. I think there's a good case to be made for it modifying singing. Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs are, sung composition type things. And so it makes a lot of sense to say singing with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. But I think the way the verse is set up, it syntactically and grammatically flows better if you read it teaching and instructing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, because then you have a balance of prepositional phrases. So you have with all wisdom, teaching and instructing with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, and then with gratitude, singing in your hearts to God. So there's a kind of parallelism
Well,
there.
that makes perfect sense, yeah. Do you distinguish between what is a psalm, a hymn, and a spiritual song? Or are these sort of synonyms, three ways of saying the same thing, right?
I take them as synonyms. I mean, there's been
Okay.
a lot of theological weight, particularly for theology of worship, kind of put on the difference between psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Like some
Mm-hmm.
people will want to say that psalms are like Old Testament psalms, hymns are like new Christian creations, and spiritual songs are songs that are spontaneously in the spirit. But looking at kind of like the history of how psalmos and hymnos are used, particularly in early Christian literature, they're often used interchangeably. And so it's hard to make that distinction between these. And I think they're
Right,
more for rhetorical effect, like make sure you sing these things,
right.
like make sure you teach with them, like these are useful for instruction.
Yeah. So you wrote your thesis around this particular text. And I know it's really hard in just 30 seconds to sum up what you were writing about for 7 years of your life or however
Mm-hmm.
long it took you. But what were you arguing? What was your main point there?
Well, I was arguing that the act, like the embodied act of singing, is significant for understanding what Paul or the author of Colossians is doing in encouraging this young congregation to live a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's interesting that here in the middle of this passage about like, be kind to each other, forgive, make peace, that sing to one another and like sing to God and teach with these psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs is part of that kind of moral instruction.
Right.
And so my research was focused on what does that say about the kind of maturity and the kind of moral life that the author wants for this congregation. And what does looking at what music making and singing does in contemporary context, how does that help us understand that kind of moral vision of the
Yeah.
letter?
So would this singing be taking place on a daily basis, you think? Or is this just when the church gathers to sing, when they gather to hear the word, let's say, and sing and that kind of thing? Or is this something that happens on a more regular basis?
I think both. I mean, I think that it's imperative for the author that whenever they gather together to hear the word, to worship together, that singing takes place. But I think that spills over into their family life, their
Sure.
personal life. I mean, that's the way singing kind of works. You learn it corporately, but then, you walk around and you sing to yourself as you're doing your chores, and it kind of infiltrates your being in a way.
Right. There's a lot of work on music as kind of therapy, as well as for moral formation, right? But there is a therapeutic aspect to hymn making and hymn singing. And I
Mm-hmm.
know people who have gotten up older in life, and the hymns have served, the legacy hymns, the old hymns have served as a great way of comfort to them, of reminding them who they are, whose they are, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. So hymn making and moral formation, I love what you're doing there. Is any chance that might be published?
I'm hoping so. I'm working on that right now.
Let us know, because we do another podcast at the Lanier Library called The Stone Chapel, and we love to talk to new authors about their books and the theology and the text behind there. But Dr. Amy Whisenand Krall, thank you for being with us today.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who help us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, a first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.